Welcome back to Reading Bear. Today, we will take a look at some new malicious compliance stories. And if you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comments. Let's go!
The first one is titled, "You're all the same store with different names, give me my flyer special." Many years ago, I worked for a discount chain called Bargain Harold's. They were the discount branch of Kmart, so that will give you an idea of our clientele. We had a customer, let's call her Karen, come in waving a flyer looking for the jeans on sale. Only it wasn't our flyer, it was from the competing discount chain, Buy Way. When she was told that she could not buy cheap Levi's at our store, she hit the roof and quickly escalated to wanting to talk to the manager. The manager explained to the customer that the Buy Way flyer was not valid at Bargain Harold's and that we had no Levi's we could sell her. Karen did not take this well and firmly insisted that the stores were exactly the same but with different names and that we sold the same products and we needed to honor the flyer. Cue the malicious compliance. My manager paused and then told her she was correct. We would honor the flyer. We would do better than price matching, we would give her jeans for free. Any pair of Levi's that Karen could find would be hers, for free. Thing is, Bargain Harold's didn't sell Levi's, we sold GWGs. We figure from the mess she made at the jean wall that she must have been looking for a good hour before she slunk out of the store, never to be seen or heard of again. The next one is titled, "Don't touch the jukebox till all of entitled customers' songs have played." Fine by me. I had last night off, so I met up with a friend at another bar for a few drinks and some food. After supper, we decide to walk to the bar I work at to cap off the evening. We get there, and there is a good energy going on. The music is a bit louder than usual, and there are maybe 10 patrons in the bar. We have this one customer who is extremely wealthy, and it's nothing for him to spend $200 to $400 per night multiple times a week buying everyone rounds. As such, he's treated like royalty around there. So I'm sitting there having a really good time, enjoying a beer, and decide that I want to add a song to the jukebox. I grab a $5 bill and walk over, only to notice 63 credits showing on the screen. No big deal, I think, I'll just put my $5 in, request a few songs, and leave the 63 credits untouched. But no. Our wealthy regular, let's call him Jack, see me perusing the jukebox and come up and physically pushes me away from it. I ask him what the duck he thinks he's doing. He says those are his credits, and no one is allowed to touch the jukebox till he's used them up. I point out that I have my own $5, and no intention of using any of his credits. Nope, not good enough. No one is allowed to touch it till he's done with them. I know it's not worth arguing, so I step back, and he starts requesting songs till he's used up every single credit. Each song costs 2 to 5 credits, so he put in a lot of songs. Each song gives you the option to pay an extra 2 credits to have your song played next, but I noticed he wasn't using it. This particular brand of jukebox has an accompanying phone app. I didn't have it downloaded prior to last night. But I do now. I calmly sat down at my table with my friend, and put my plan in motion. I go to the App Store, find the app, download, install it, create an account, and purchase $10 worth of credits. I request 2 songs, and pay the extra 2 credits to fast track them. I sit there in quiet anticipation, and I can see that Jack is starting to get into a groove with the music he'd requested, Vietnam rock. His heart gloriously sinks when "Bomb Bomb Bomb" by Sam and the Womp comes on. No big deal, guys, his song must be next. Nope, it's "Wannabe" by the Spice Girls. He sits down, dejected. I quickly purchase another $20 in credits, and request "Baby" by Justin Bieber, "Livin' La Vida Loca" by Ricky Martin, "Axel F" by Crazy Frog, "Foil" by Weird Al Yankovic. And fast track every one of them. Partway through "Foil", I notice Jack sulking in his chair, so I purchase another $20 in credits, and proceed to request "Never Going to Give You Up" by Rick Astley, "Who Let the Dogs Out" Barking Mad remix by Baha Men, "Numa Numa" by Ozone, "Pa Pal Americano" by Yolanda Be Cool, and "Star Wars Cantina March" by John Williams. They're starting realize something is up, so Jack and a few staff who were on last night convene at the jukebox to try to figure it out. At this point the Cantina March is playing. They turn the jukebox off. Then back on again. Doop 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 doop. They turn it off. Then back on. Doop 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 doop, each time picking up where it left off. I can't hold my laughter, and let out a muted chuckle. One of my co-workers catches on, and comes over with her phone in her hand with the app open and shoves it in my face with a "How ducking dare you, yada yada yada." I quietly get up, down my last mouthful of beer, put my jacket on, and walk out without a word. I walk down the street to a greasy spoon that our staff and customers are regulars at due to proximity. I sit down, order a beer and a burger, and proceed to log back into the app. I purchase another $10 worth of credits, and fast-track All I Want for Christmas by Mariah Carey and Mickey by Tony Basil as one last bite me to Jack. I can only imagine the fallout I'm going to face Monday afternoon when I show up to work, but whatever. My $40 was no less valid than his, and no one customer gets to commandeer the tunes for the entire night and physically block anyone else from touching it. Side note, yes, I did realize partway through my shenanigans that I could have just requested "What's New Pussycat" by Tom Jones multiple times, but by then I was too deep in. The next one is titled, "Force Me to Obtain My Own Work Uniform with No Notice After Slashing My Hours?" Really? My final retail job was at a preppy designer clothing store. When I started working there, we were encouraged to wear the brand to work, although you could also wear plain khakis and a plain polo shirt. Then after a while, the general manager left. The new GM, a vicious, racist, labor law ignoring psychopath, announces that we all have to switch to uniforms. Khakis or denim only, and a navy blue polo shirt or button down only. Which would be fine, but the company won't provide them, and the GM from hell waited until 3 days before the deadline to tell us. And, at the time, the store was very picked over from a big sale, so there was almost no acceptable stock and all the most common sizes in those styles were gone. About 60 employees, mostly part-timers, were frantically scrambling to find acceptable clothes with almost no notice, at our own expense, and nearly all of us had to look elsewhere. This was a particularly nightmarish prospect for me. I'd had my hours slashed repeatedly in retaliation for reporting a work injury. The GM was later demoted over it, and another manager was fired, but that's another story. I had no money. After rent and food, I had nothing left at the end of the month, and for the first time ever in my life, had to carry a balance on my credit card just to eat, and I can live on almost nothing. And by this point, that balance was maxed out due to car repairs. To make matters worse, my body is a nightmare to fit. Polos hang on me like tents, and button-ups always gap. Even if I could afford to buy the clothes I was now expected to wear, they weren't going to fit me to brand standards, and I would not have time to take them apart and reconstruct them. I went to the managers and explained that I couldn't afford any more clothes. They'd cut my hours. The GM had deliberately interfered with my job search, like I was going to stay put with her around. My credit card was maxed out, and I had no money left. Could I please get some help? Oh, it can be any brand, just no logo. Maybe you didn't hear me. I can't even afford to go to the Goodwill. True. They blew me off. Again. So you won't help me? Suit yourselves. I called my mum and asked if she still had any of the navy blue cotton fabric left over from a long ago sewing project. I was a fashion design major in art school. I know how to make a shirt that fits me. I already had one pair of handmade jeans, since R&R discontinued my preferred cut. The shirt met the required criteria of having a collar and buttons, but I deliberately did not do a great job. And I know how to do a great job. I didn't have time to make a collar mock-up and adjust the pattern for the best drape. Oh well, the collar's just going to sit funny. I only had enough interfacing for the placket and the undercollar. Oh well, the collar already sits kind of funny anyway. I didn't have time to turn the collar points out exactly right. Oh well, they just won't quite match, and one of them is just going to stick out a bit. I didn't have time to fix some crooked top stitching. Oh well, the thread matches anyway. I didn't have time to sew functional buttonholes. Oh well, the shirt closes with hidden zippers anyway, so it wouldn't gap. I didn't have the time, or money, to go to the fabric store for matching buttons and used several very similar ones. Oh well, you'd have to have a very sharp eye to notice. The fabric rolled and creased a bit along the hemline in 3 or 4 places. Oh well, I didn't have time to press it, let alone hand stitch it. The first day the uniform rule was in effect, evil GM got one look at the shirt and her nasty smug smirk evaporated. She was fuming, but she couldn't do or say anything about it. After all, it fit the required criteria. And it was the best anyone could reasonably be expected to do with no notice, no money, and no help whatsoever. Sewing is a lot of work, you know. Yes, I got the hell out of there as soon as I could. The next one is titled, Don't Follow the Crowd or You'll Never Get to Heaven? Okay then. This is a story of child me thoroughly upsetting my mother, disrupting a church service and undermining a sermon through malicious compliance. I do still argue that my view also represented a serious theological argument, but this story is frequently brought up to show how contrarian and poorly behaved I was a child, or how much I think I'm so funny. I was about 10 years old at this time, but already showing some displeasure with weekly church attendance when there was video games or sleeping in I could be doing on Sunday mornings. In the church where I grew up, children would start the service with the adults, and after a few songs they would head out to a back room and do more child-appropriate lessons while the adults had their longer, more boring sermons. My mother took an active role in the kids' activities and to her credit spent a lot of time trying to make it fun, doing plays or musical numbers that the children would all practice and then come into the adults' service to present what we had learned. For a couple of weeks leading up to this incident we had been learning about the parable of the two gates in Matthew 7:13 to 15:13. Enter through the narrow gate. For wide is the gate and broad is the road that leads to destruction, and many enter through it. 14 But small is the gate and narrow the road that leads to life, and only a few find it. Less than you don't have to be a Christian scholar to guess the message here. Getting to heaven can be tough, you will walk the path less traveled, and you must not be tempted to conform to majority. The time came for us to present how much we had learned to the rest of the church. Instead of going to our back room, all of the kids head up on stage. My mother and her helpers have arranged two doorways, one very big and one very narrow. The narrow doorway has heaven written above it, and the broad doorway hell. A few well-spoken kids get their turn on the microphone to talk about the parable and how they promise not to be led astray by the crowd and stay focused on their faith, even if it's the harder path, etc. We are then all lined up and told to choose our doorway. Cue malicious compliance. Every child walks one by one through the narrow doorway marked heaven and stands in a group behind as the congregation smiles and cheers their dedication to Christ. It was a literal and everyone clapped moment right up until I proudly strut through the broad doorway marked hell. There's a few nervous laughs and a lot of frowns until the minister asks me, didn't I walk through the wrong door? No sir. The Bible teaches we should not follow the crowd, so this must be the difficult door that leads to heaven after all. I got a few more laughs and the minister started to chastise me for not understanding the lesson. I was ordered to go through the correct door by my mother and did so with the most smug 12-year-old grin you can imagine. The fallout later was as expected. I had a lot of old ladies scolding me at the morning tea after church. My mother confiscated my video games for a couple of weeks and I was made to write a letter of apology to the minister. Regardless, I still feel like I made my point and at the benefit of disrupting a church service I didn't want to attend. A few months, and a few more outspoken jabs at the church lessons later, and I was given permission to stay home from church if I didn't want to go anymore. The next one is titled, Change My Schedule? Okay, whatever you say, boss. A few years ago I was working for a small company that had two office locations, Office A and Office B. Each office had its own office manager. Let's pretend their names are Susan and Ashley respectively. Ashley was a new manager and Susan has been there for over 10 years. They're both terrible, but at least Susan was competent at her job. For some reason Ashley did not like me. I think it was because I was the youngest and she had to prove something as a new manager and I was the easy target. Her management style was horrible. She never helped out and would always micromanage us. She walked around the small office announcing she was the boss every 5 minutes without doing any work. The staff and I like to say, whatever you say boss, behind her back when she tells us to do something. So my schedule rotates between the two offices. The second week of Ashley being my boss, she tells me that she was going to switch my schedule and have me work at Office B full-time with her. I know she just did this to keep me under her thumb, it made no sense whatsoever. I had another job offer lined up and only told Susan and the other staff about it, so I played along. I said, okay, you're the boss. The next day I showed up at Office B, but my regular schedule meant I should have been working at Office A that day. Mind you, this is a small company with 5 staff per office. So when one of us is sick or on vacation, the work gets very overwhelming. Susan is frantically calling me on the office phone and asking where I was and why I didn't call to tell her I wasn't coming in. I told her that Ashley had switched my schedule and I did the innocent voice, "Oh, she didn't tell you? Did she at least update the main schedule in our system? Do you want to speak to her on the phone?" I called Ashley over and handed her the phone, and all I hear is very loud inaudible yelling from Susan. Susan does not like Ashley. There was a power struggle and Susan wanted to manage both offices. I couldn't stop smiling from their conversation. All Ashley said on the phone was, "Yes, okay, I understand, yes." When she hangs up, I asked Ashley slyly, "Oh, you didn't inform Susan of my schedule change? Next time you should have these changes approved by our boss, and you do know where the main schedule is, right?" She just walked away. I was having a field day. An hour later, Susan called again to ask if I would be willing to drive over to Office B. I said I would, but since I'm on company's time now, the owner would have to compensate my time commuting and gas mileage. I know the owner was a total cheapskate, so he would never agree to it. Susan asked to speak to Ashley again, and the second phone call was even funnier. I'm not sure what happened afterwards because I left the office for my new job 2 weeks later. Maybe this was rude of me, but I had an offer before Ashley was hired. So only the owner, Susan, and staff knew I was leaving. On my last day, the owner asked Ashley if she interviewed anyone yet to replace me. The look on her face was priceless. She had no idea. The last one is titled, "The Software Does All That Now." Okay, boss. Many moons ago, before the '08 recession, I, manager of the records department, among other things, worked in an industry where record keeping is super critical. Bad records mean no more business because one of the many government agencies would shut you down, sometimes permanently. My direct boss, who reported to the CEO, was a good enough person but was overworked and would grab onto any idea as long as it kicked the can down the road, at which point the problem was worse. He needed to go, but the CEO liked the results despite how negatively they impacted production and morale. In short, my boss had to go away and I needed to be the one reporting to the CEO. So I waited until he grabbed onto an idea so terrible that it had to exploit. My boss came in and told me to stop the record keeping, all of it. He told me the salesperson for our software provider informed him that the software could do all of it. My boss was even kind enough to send me a direct email stating all of this. I called my team in and told them the news. We were all horrified and knew this would come back to bite us all. The software in question could do the job, but it was never set up or configured to meet the requirements. I had already spoken to legal and our government contacts a few months earlier about having software to do this, and we are required to inform them and submit samples of it prior to going live. None of that was ever done. So we kept doing our job, as normal, and strangely no one asked any questions, until the quarterly meetings. My boss apparently had not informed the CEO on his plan and instead decided to show the cost savings he had implemented at the quarterly meeting. Thankfully our accountant was a sharp-eyed person and she immediately started questioning things. From the information I received from other folks who were in the meeting at that point, the accountant asked how it was possible, and my boss confidently told them he stopped the record-keeping requirements and the software was taking care of it all now. The IT people, who knew what was required to be complained, apparently created a sound akin to a record needle scratch. IT stated we were months from implementation. Legal chimed in and pointed out that we were now in a serious bad legal position. The CEO turned white before assuming a wondrous red tinge. Much shouting was then heard. Apparently, the salesperson told me it would work was not a good excuse. Suddenly my phone rings and it is the CEO. I am ordered to the conference room. I smile, grab my folder of evidence, inform my team I might not be back and it's been fun, and walk towards my fate. I walk into a scene I would like to have taken a picture of. The CEO, legal, and IT are up in arms. My boss looks defeated because he now understands how big the issue is now. I grab a seat and listen to the lamenting of the masses. When it is my turn to talk, I calmly explain my side of things. The CEO loved the direct email from my boss telling me to stop record keeping. After letting that sink in, I calmly told them of my insubordination for the good of the company, the uninterrupted status of the record keeping, and how we were not in a pile of trouble but in fact were 100% compliant. There was a collective sigh of relief. I then told them moving forward I would like to be out from under my boss management and would prefer to report directly to the CEO. To my surprise, they agreed, and within the week my boss was moved to places he could inflict less damage while having more eyes on his actions. Look at me, I'm the boss now. Thanks for listening.